G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and I did tell you I was going to come out with a video talking about this librarian, but it's probably not for the reasons one would think. For the model itself, I actually think it's really good, and I'm not the biggest fan of some of the painting scheme choices they've made, but who cares? No, the reason I want to talk about it is because it's very interesting to contrast this Weimer 40,000 starter box plastic librarian that's going to be a snap fit monopose model with this piece of crap. Yes, why would I do such a thing? Well, one of these clearly nailed the aesthetic better than the other of the time period. Things like the psychic hood, symbols of the librarius, just a lot of generic things, right? Because this miniature clearly is a head swap away from being completely generic console, and that was very much the opinion in the comments when I spoke about it. Everyone seemed to agree on that, and some people like the helmet, but most did say, like, look, yeah, that's no way on earth that's a psychic hood, and what's the fat collar? So, the reason I'm making this video, because I don't want to diverge on how crap this model is to basically point out we have hit a point where the plastics coming out of Games Workshop are more appealing than the resins coming out of Forge World. And that got me thinking, when was the last truly great resin miniature, and what can I compare to in the last year or two? So I think the last, I can't say truly great because it's got some flaws, but the last decent miniature is probably, well, it's probably Exodus here. And really a lot of that just comes down to the detail in the scales on the shins. But it has many of the hallmarks of its Legion. There's just some weird quirks of it, like the fact he's got a regular bolt gun magazine in this giant Barrett-looking rifle of his. Just, little quirks like that. But otherwise, a more than perfectly adequate model, right? And I'm cool with that. So, this model's interesting. It has quite a bit going on that I like. So there's that. But what else? Well, I thought of some of the more recent releases. We got, Malagurst and the Sons of Horus Cataphracti Praetor. What about the Power Armored Praetor or the Imperial Fist Terminator? Or, of course, there's Imperial Fist guy on foot. But the more you look at something like this, you realise there is no better detail in this than, something like these new 40k Black Templars. In fact, I would argue something like this Black Templars Marshal here has far, far more detail going on with him than this Sons of Horus character does. And I pointed out because part of the selling point of resins is that they're supposed to be a higher quality miniature, They're a more bespoke miniature from Forge World, at least back in the day. Okay, it was Forge World produced the miniatures that they couldn't justify producing in quantity at Games Workshop, and well, it was easier to cast them in resin for these low batch runs, and you got a higher quality part out of it as a trade-off for it not being injection molded plastics. That's sort of the idea of it. And yet, well, we find that consistently the resin miniatures are being surpassed, and that lack of imagination is really starting to show. Because, let's take some other examples. What about the the Wordbearer's Legion Praetor, right? Power armor. It's okay. Nothing to really hate about this. Yeah, the tactical rock's dumb. Old meme. But how's that compare to something like this Dark Apostle? That's a $4 price difference, and one kit gives you, a beautiful Dark Apostle and these two acolytes with it, and the other just gives you this very bland, paint-by-numbers Wordbearer's Legion Praetor. And I don't want to disparage the sculptors here. I don't want to say that they're awful and, their work is bad and they should feel bad. But it's more like whether the sculptors themselves are being hamstrung by the studios, or whether they just don't think it will sell. I don't know what it is, but clearly there is a lot more love and passion going into something like 40k sculpts, or maybe the better sculptors are being assigned to that department. I can't exactly nail it down. Another really jarring example of this is the new Esoterist. This is a new miniature being sold for, I think, an extortionate amount of money because it is missing things like sleeves, right? You can see that the sleeve is painted on. It's not actually a hollow. They didn't sculpt it for whatever reason. And it's little things like that that make you go, huh? On an otherwise pretty good looking model. And yet compare that and the amount of detail to this, the Chaos Space Marine Sorcerer. How this to me is about the maximum level of busy I can deal with in a miniature before it's too much overload on a 28mm tall Space Marine. But I think it really nailed just the right amount of detail here, and look what's going on with this. This guy feels more like an esoterist than the esoterist does. He just feels so bland, so vanilla, and they're really functionally the same miniature. You know, this guy has his little 8-pointed Chaos Star staff with, you know, he's got his little hand outstretched and he's casting his little rune and tainted scriptures and scrolls on him and the tattered cloak, like very mysterious entity going on. And then the esoterist, same sort of thing. He's got his scrolls and he's got his cloak and he's got his 8-pointed star, little stuff. You know, it's a lot of the same hallmarks, but this guy is so much more vanilla, right? And there are ways of dressing up, and I do not consider this to be a bad model. I really want to reiterate that point, because someone's probably saying, well, you know, what's wrong with this model? It's perfectly good. Yeah, it is perfectly good. But it's also more expensive as well than this Chaos Space Marine Sorcerer. And Chaos Space Marine Sorcerer is a dime a dozen. Could this guy... Here's a possible thought for you all. Many kits out there exist as dual build kits, right? Like the new Corn Lord on the Juggernaut, right? What if the Librarian and the Esoterist actually shared a blister pack as a plastic miniature, and you could build it as an Esoterist or a Librarian, or potentially a Nullificator Primus, but that would require a certain armor type. Wouldn't that be interesting, eh? Yeah, that's just a little thought I have there. And, you know, I really do think it's kind of a sign of the times that the plastic miniatures are really growing in the quality output. Like, a miniature like this has its flaws. Like, all miniatures pretty much have some flaws, right? But you compare the quality of that with, like, Malagust. Like, nothing wrong with Malagust, I guess. I'm not the biggest fan of this miniature, but I know many people are, and I'm not here to rain on your parade with my mere opinions. But Malagust here, well, this could easily within the realms of what they make in plastic today. So I think officially we've hit the point where Forge World's resins, really, apart from perhaps the Primarchs, they're making nothing that couldn't be made in plastic to an equal or higher standard. And that is just a crazy thought to have, because, you know, it's marketed as this high quality product, and, well, $76 for Malachus the Twisted. You know, you could get that Dark Apostle with his two, you know, henchmen for less than that. That's 3 models, and they're bigger as well. So I'm not sure what we're paying for. And then to come back to this guy, right? The original starter of the video. And like I said, I like this miniature. I don't really agree with all the glowing effects on the arm or the source lighting, but yeah, it's just personal taste. But I do look at all those symbols and runes and sigils on the armor and the carvings, and they look awfully similar to someone else we know. Yes, those circular patterns are Wordbearer, Colchizian star formations. Now, they might try and say it's something else, like their hexachromatic wards or whatever has been thrown around. Yeah, I think they just took some spooky stuff off the Wordbearers and slapped it on this guy without thinking, because all of those symbols around his armor are symbols off the Wordbearers decal sheets from Betrayal of Kelth and their current decal sheet from the 30k decals range, I guess we can call it. So, yeah, this is possibly a traitor librarian you're actually looking at. This is actually a Chaos Sorcerer. He just doesn't realise it yet, perhaps. But yeah, I think this is, on the whole, a very nice looking model, and it's a real shame to see that basic starter box plastic miniatures like this are coming in at a, personal opinion here, higher quality and higher fidelity than the Heresy miniatures, which are costing more and trying to, well, they're supposed to have a wider appeal to the Heresy community, right? Because every Heresy army needs Legion consoles, or every Marine army, I should say, needs Legion consoles. So if you make really nice ones, you get to sell them to everyone. But 40k, not everyone needs a librarian. They got to get one in the starter box, for sure. And they didn't have to put a librarian in the starter box. They just chose to. Maybe Psychic Powers is something they really want to push this edition. Who knows? But it's very interesting to see the effort that went into one versus the effort that went into another. And again, it's not a per se bad sculpt. It's a bad librarian sculpt. This guy would be very easy to convert into anything else that's not a librarian, because there's really nothing to tell you that he is a librarian. The helmet doesn't even look particularly like a librarian helmet. At least, take your cues from this guy. He's got these sort of spirit stone looking gems all over his armor. That was a thing back in like 2nd and 3rd ed. You saw quite a bit on librarians. It sort of faded away over time. Kind of like that it's coming back. I don't think they're actually spirit stones, by the way. They're just glowing orb shit. But he's got the psychic hood. He's got the librarian symbol on the wristband. Right? Like, he's trying to be a librarian. The axe has the librarian symbol on it, and the classic librarian swirly lightning on the axe. Like, all hallmarks of the librarius, and none of which is seen on this guy. Like, it just goes to show, right? What that little bit of extra detail can bring to a model. And, honestly, it's, I think, a real shame that they didn't do a 2-part plastic kit with, I do think they should do a Legion console plastic box, which gives you a whole bunch of parts. That would be really cool. But financially, maybe not tenable. You can't argue that it wouldn't be financially sound to do a trader, the Esoterist / Librarian, as a 2-part kit. That's easily within the realms of financial viability. The problem is that they want instant return on their investment of dies that they've already dropped on the Heresy, and unfortunately, with this consistent push of resin for the Heresy instead of plastic for the Heresy, it's only going to hurt the health of the game, because so many people are just averse to resin. Right? Especially people who had bad experiences with Finecast. They don't want to touch the stuff, and who can blame them? And when every second week there's a new Space Marine miniature coming out in plastic that surely the demand isn't there for, what can I say? What can I say? Anyway, that's it for me. Back at the Outer Circle. Yeah, in case you missed it, really like this model. Something to think about. And I really don't like the Heresy model. That's also something to think about. What crazy times we live in, where I'm feeling more positive in ways about 10th than Heresy. Wow. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.